The Hillsborough tragedy. The day when football became mourning. Saturday, April 15, 1989. Spring sunshine bathed Sheffield, a city that was destined to be the capital of English football that day. The FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at the Hillsborough Stadium was anticipated as a legendary sporting clash. But at 3:06 p.m. GMT, time at the stadium stopped forever. This day became more than just a tragedy. It was a verdict on the entire British security system of the era. It is a story of how the police's scorched earth fear of a mythical fan fight turned a terrace into a mass grave. And instead of saving suffocating children, officers built human walls to protect the grass on the pitch. The prelude to this nightmare began long before the opening whistle. English football in the 1980s was steeped in an atmosphere of hostility. Margaret Thatcher's government viewed football fans as the enemy within. Stadiums of that time resembled concentration camps for civilians. Terraces were divided into pens by high steel fences, and fans were separated from the pitch by barriers topped with inward curving spikes. It was believed this was the only way to prevent pitch invasions and mass brawls. In Sheffield, this architecture of fear transformed into an instrument of mass murder. Command of the security operation was handed to David Duckenfield, a man who had been promoted just weeks before the match and had virtually no experience managing massive crowds under the pressure of a high-stakes football game. The logistics were doomed from the start. Liverpool fans, who travelled in significantly larger numbers, were allocated the Leppings Lane end, which had a smaller capacity and was accessed via a narrow alleyway with a pitifully small number of turnstiles. By 2:30 p.m., over 10,000 people were bottlenecked outside the stadium. The crush began before they even got in. People were pinned against brick walls, children were gasping for air in the crowd, and the police, instead of opening extra gates or delaying the kickoff, continued to demand tickets, creating a deadly bottleneck effect. At 2:52 p.m., Duckenfield made his most fatal error. Seeing that the situation outside was becoming critical and fearing people would be crushed at the turnstiles, he ordered the opening of Gate C, a large steel gate intended only for exiting. Approximately 2,000 people surged through the opening. Ahead of them was a dark tunnel leading directly into the central pens, 3 and 4. Not a single police officer stood at the tunnel entrance to redirect the flow to the side pens, which were half empty. People ran down the tunnel, hearing the roar of the crowd, unaware that a steel trap awaited them at the end. Death inside pens 3 and 4 arrived almost instantly for the front rows. When the avalanche of people from the tunnel hit the backs of those already on the terrace, the pressure exceeded all imaginable limits. People were slammed into the perimeter fence. This wasn't a fight in the conventional sense. It was a physical struggle for the right to take a single breath. People's chests were compressed with such force that ribs snapped like dry twigs. This was compressive asphyxia. A person could not expand their lungs to inhale. Blood stopped flowing to the brain, and consciousness faded in seconds. Faces turned deep blue, then black, as blood began to seep from noses and mouths due to bursting capillaries. The most horrific aspect was the police reaction. As the first fans began to climb over the fences to escape the suffocation, officers on the pitch assumed a riot was beginning. They saw this as an attempt to break onto the pitch to start a fight with the opposing fans. Officers ran to the fences and used their batons to beat people back into the crush. One survivor recalled begging an officer to open a small gate, pointing to a dying teenager next to him, only to be told, "Shut up, you scum. Stay where you are." The police were trained to suppress aggression, but they were utterly blind to human suffering. They continued to see hooligans where there were dying victims. At 3 p.m., the referee blew the whistle. The match began. On the pitch, the game was underway, while just meters behind goalkeeper Bruce Grobbelaar's net, hell was unfolding. Bruce later recalled hearing the thud of bodies hitting the mesh and screams of, "Help us! Bruce, we're dying!" He tried several times to get the attention of the police, but they ignored him, standing in a line to protect the turf. At 3:06 p.m., the match was finally stopped after a fan managed to scramble over the fence and run to the referee. At that moment, a steel crush barrier inside the pen buckled and snapped. Hundreds of people tumbled forward, forming a living mountain of bodies. Those at the bottom of that pile stood no chance. People lay in layers, suffocating under the weight of their fellow supporters. Meanwhile, at the other end of the stadium, Nottingham Forest fans, unaware of the severity of the situation, began chanting insults, thinking Liverpool was simply trying to get the game abandoned. This created even more tension for the police. They genuinely expected a large-scale intercity fight to break out. Instead of letting medics reach the Leppings Lane terrace, the South Yorkshire police formed a cordon at the halfway line, blocking the path for ambulances. Of the dozens of ambulances that arrived, only one was allowed onto the pitch. The surviving Liverpool fans became the real medics. Seeing the police remain idle, they began tearing down the wooden advertising hoardings around the perimeter of the pitch with their bare hands. These pieces of plastic and wood became improvised stretchers. Footage from the day shows young men in red shirts running across the entire pitch, carrying the bodies of their friends on these boards, while dozens of police officers stood in a line, simply watching. Fans performed CPR on the grass, using their football scarves as bandages and slings. One of the most tragic stories was the death of the Hicks sisters, Sarah and Victoria. Their father, Trevor, ran between the bodies of his daughters on the pitch, trying to resuscitate both of them simultaneously. He begged the police to help carry them to an ambulance, but he was ignored. Eventually, he loaded one daughter into a van, being used as a temporary morgue, hoping she was still alive. Both girls died. Later, it was revealed that Victoria had shown signs of life long after the time the police officially declared all victims inevitably dead. But the horror of April 15th did not end with the death of the last fan. That same night, an operation to blacken the names of the victims began. David Duckenfield officially lied to the Football Association, claiming that fans had forced the gate open. This lie became the foundation for all subsequent propaganda. The police began questioning survivors as if they were criminals. They took blood samples from dead children to check for alcohol, hoping to prove they were drunk and had caused the crush themselves. Officers were ordered to rewrite their statements, removing any mention of panic within police ranks or the lack of medical equipment. 4 days later, the Sun newspaper published an article under the headline, "The Truth." Citing anonymous police sources, the publication claimed that Liverpool fans had urinated on rescuers, beaten up doctors trying to help, and picked the pockets of the dead. This lie was so monstrous and cynical that the city of Liverpool still boycotts the paper to this day. Not a single one of these allegations was ever proven, but the goal was achieved. British public opinion was split, and for many years, The victims of Hillsborough carried the stigma of being responsible for their own deaths. The battle for justice lasted 27 years. The families of the deceased, united as Justice for the 96, went through the circles of legal hell. They were denied inquests, mocked in the press, and ignored by politicians. But the mothers of the dead, like Anne Williams and Margaret Aspinall, never gave up. They demanded the opening of the archives. In 2012, the independent panel finally published secret police documents proving that hundreds of statements had been falsified and that 41 people could have been saved if the medical response had been adequate. In 2016, something happened that many had stopped believing in. A jury delivered a new verdict: unlawful killing. It was officially recognized that the fans bore no responsibility for the tragedy. The blame fell entirely on the shoulders of the police and the stadium's safety authorities. However, despite this verdict, David Duckenfield never faced real criminal punishment, which served as the final bitter chord in this long history. Today, Hillsborough is a symbol of how fragile human life is in the face of a bureaucratic machine and prejudice. Football in England changed forever. The fences were removed, standing terraces were banned, and a system of stewards was introduced. But the price of these changes was paid with the blood of 97 people. In 2021, Andrew Devine was added to the list of victims, having died from the injuries he sustained that day. Hillsborough teaches us that the fight the authorities fear most is often not on the pitch, but in the courtrooms where truth battles lies. Every year, on April 15th, the city of Liverpool falls silent. We remember those who simply went to watch their team and stayed there forever. Their names are carved into the memorial, and their story serves as a permanent reminder. Behind every fan crowd are living people, children, fathers, and sisters, and none of them will ever walk alone. If you are interested in the mysteries of the English language and the hidden history of Britain, be sure to subscribe to my channel. British Nostalgia.